A simple woman stood silently as rich socialites ridiculed her at an exclusive art gala. New maid? Miranda Rothschild sneered loudly, causing laughter to erupt. But when a famous art critic arrived, everything changed. They were about to discover Victoria Hayes was richer than all of them combined. The Westfield Museum of Modern Art shimmered under elegant lighting, its marble floors reflecting the glittering jewelry and designer outfits of New York's elite. A charity gala to raise funds for arts education had transformed the main gallery into a sea of wealth and prestige. Victoria Hayes stepped through the grand entrance, her amber eyes taking in the scene with quiet appreciation. At 44, she carried herself with understated confidence. Her simple beige sweater, tailored slacks, and minimal makeup contrasted sharply with the extravagance around her. No diamonds adorned her neck, no designer label flashed from her modest purse. "Name, please?" asked the attendant, a hint of skepticism in his voice as he scanned her attire. "Victoria Hayes," she replied softly. The young man's finger moved down the list with visible doubt. His eyebrows rose slightly when he found her name. "Oh, yes, Ms. Hayes. Welcome." Victoria nodded politely and accepted her entry card, moving into the gallery space where waiters circulated with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Near a striking abstract painting, Miranda Rothschild held court with her usual entourage. At 50, she maintained her position as the self-appointed queen of Manhattan's social scene through strategic donations and even more strategic friendships. Her tailored navy suit and pearl necklace, the uniform of old money, complemented her perfectly coiffed auburn hair. "Darlings, did you see the Bergman collection?" Miranda's voice carried deliberately. "Simply divine, though I told Howard the pricing was a bit presumptuous, even for him." Heads nodded in agreement, champagne glasses clinked. No one dared disagree with Miranda Rothschild. Victoria moved through the space quietly, stopping to truly observe each painting, her head tilting slightly as she absorbed the details. She declined champagne with a gentle shake of her head, focused instead on the artwork. Miranda's gaze drifted across the room, settling on Victoria. Her eyes narrowed as she catalogued the simple outfit, the unadorned fingers, the sensible shoes. A smirk formed on her glossy lips. "Who let the help in early?" she stage-whispered to her companions, just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Jacqueline Kensington, Miranda's loyal second-in-command, giggled behind her hand. "Maybe she's lost." The catering entrance is around back. Victoria remained absorbed in a vibrant oil painting, seemingly oblivious to their comments. She moved closer to the canvas, studying the brushwork with genuine interest. Behind her, footsteps approached. Miranda's perfume, an expensive French fragrance, announced her presence before she spoke. "The artwork is quite expensive," Miranda said, with exaggerated slowness, as if speaking to a child. "Best not to stand too close. Wouldn't want any accidents." Victoria turned slightly, meeting Miranda's gaze with calm dignity. "Thank you for your concern," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "I was admiring the technique." Miranda's eyebrows arched dramatically. "Oh, you know about technique? How fascinating." Her voice dripped with condescension. She turned to her friends who had gathered like vultures. "She knows about technique, ladies." Laughter rippled through the group. Victoria simply offered a small smile and moved to the next painting, maintaining her composure, though a faint pink had touched her cheeks. "Should someone tell her the fundraiser hasn't started yet? The cleaning staff usually finishes before guests arrive," Jacqueline said, loud enough for Victoria to hear. Miranda's smile widened, cruel and satisfied. "Perhaps she's the new maid? Though someone should really tell her about the dress code." More laughter. Victoria's back straightened almost imperceptibly, but she continued her methodical appreciation of the art, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. "I simply can't bear it," Miranda declared, her voice carrying across the gallery. "Someone has to say something. This is the Westfield, not some public library." Victoria had moved to a sculpture display, her fingers lightly clasped behind her back as she circled a modern piece, studying its curves and angles. Miranda glided toward her, her entourage trailing like expensive perfume. "Excuse me," she called out. "I believe there's been some confusion. The general admission event is tomorrow. Tonight is for donors and patrons only." Several nearby conversations quieted as people turned to watch. Victoria looked up, meeting Miranda's gaze directly. "There's no confusion. I have an invitation." Her voice remained calm, neither defensive nor confrontational. Miranda's eyes widened in mock surprise. "Really? How unusual." She extended her manicured hand. "I'm Miranda Rothschild, chairwoman of the board. And you are—" "Victoria Hayes." She shook Miranda's hand briefly. A flicker of annoyance crossed Miranda's face at the lack of recognition her name had produced. "And what brings you to our little fundraiser, Ms. Hayes? Are you interested in the arts?" The question dripped with insinuation. Victoria nodded. "Very much so." "How lovely." Miranda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And what do you do, exactly?" Before Victoria could answer, Jacqueline interrupted with a theatrical gasp. "Oh, Miranda, maybe she's one of the scholarship recipients, from your foundation?" She turned to Victoria with exaggerated kindness. "Do you work with underprivileged children, dear?" Several women tittered behind their champagne glasses. "I work in business," Victoria replied simply. "Business," Miranda repeated, exchanging amused glances with her friends. How wonderfully vague. What kind of business? Retail? Administration? Her eyes dragged over Victoria's simple attire once more. "Customer service, perhaps?" "Investment and development," Victoria answered, her expression unchanged despite the growing circle of onlookers. Miranda laughed, a tinkling sound without warmth. "Of course, and I'm sure you're very successful." She gestured to Victoria's plain sweater. "One can tell by your distinctive fashion choices." The group of socialites barely contained their laughter now. A few guests looked uncomfortable, but remained silent, unwilling to cross Miranda Rothschild. "Miranda, darling," called a silver-haired woman approaching the group. "They're about to unveil the Hartman piece. You simply must give your opinion before anyone else sees it." "Of course, Veronica. Coming." Miranda turned back to Victoria, her voice honeyed with false sincerity. "Do enjoy the evening, Ms. Hayes. Feel free to take a brochure. The donation options start quite small." She emphasized the word small with a patronizing smile. "Every little bit helps." As Miranda turned to leave, she added loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "And if you're looking for employment, I believe the museum gift shop is hiring. Something more suitable for your talents." Victoria remained still, her expression giving away nothing, as laughter followed Miranda across the room. An older gentleman who had observed the exchange approached Victoria, offering a sympathetic smile. "Don't mind Miranda. She treats everyone that way unless they have a recognizable surname or a seven-figure donation history." Victoria glanced at him, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. "I'm used to it. People see what they expect to see." "Indeed they do." He extended his hand. "Jeffrey Williams. I curate the modern wing." "Victoria Hayes. Pleased to meet you." She shook his hand, then returned her attention to the sculpture. "Your collection is impressive, Mr. Williams." Jeffrey's eyes lit up with genuine appreciation. "You know art?" "I know what moves me," she replied. "This piece, for instance, the tension between structure and freedom. It's quite powerful." Jeffrey looked at her with new interest. "That's exactly what the artist intended. Most people miss it entirely." The evening progressed, with Victoria moving methodically through the gallery. Despite Miranda's continuing commentary, "Imagine thinking that outfit is appropriate for the Westfield," and "someone should really tell her the canapes aren't free." Victoria remained absorbed in the artwork. Jeffrey Williams found himself increasingly drawn to her genuine interest. Unlike most attendees who barely glanced at the collections between social maneuvers, Victoria asked thoughtful questions about provenance and technique. "You mentioned this artist died before receiving recognition?" Victoria asked, studying a small but striking canvas tucked in a corner. Jeffrey nodded. "Thomas Reed. Brilliant, but completely unknown in his lifetime. This piece sold for just $200 at a garage sale in 1982. Now it's worth at least $2 million, Victoria finished. "The market for overlooked modernists has exploded in the last decade." Jeffrey's eyebrows rose. "You really do know your art." Across the room, Miranda observed their conversation with narrowed eyes. "Look at her," she hissed to Jacqueline, "monopolizing poor Jeffrey. He's too polite to escape." Jacqueline smirked. "Perhaps she's trying to get a discount on a print." "Or a job application," added another socialite. The museum is always looking for security guards. Miranda laughed loudly, drawing attention. Victoria glanced over briefly, then returned to her conversation with Jeffrey. That painting she's so fascinated by looks like something my 5-year-old nephew could create, Miranda declared, loud enough to carry. Some people are so easily impressed by splashes of color. Jeffrey frowned at the comment, but Victoria touched his arm lightly. It's all right, she murmured. Not everyone sees value in the same things. Miranda, annoyed at Victoria's composure, approached again, champagne glass in hand. Jeffrey, darling, you're being monopolized. The Harringtons are dying to ask about the new acquisition. Jeffrey hesitated. Miranda, Ms. Hayes here has some fascinating insights about— I'm sure she does, Miranda interrupted with a dismissive wave, but the Harringtons donated $500,000 last year. Their insights take priority, wouldn't you agree? The curator's discomfort was evident, caught between professional obligation and genuine conversation. Please, Victoria said quietly, don't let me keep you from your duties, Mr. Williams. Jeffrey nodded apologetically and allowed himself to be led away by Miranda, who threw a triumphant glance over her shoulder. Left alone again, Victoria continued her tour of the gallery, now openly followed by Miranda's whispers and pointing. Some guests began to stare, wondering who this plainly dressed woman was, who had somehow earned Miranda Rothschild's focused disdain. Probably crashed the event, one woman whispered. Security is so lax these days. The evening reached its centerpiece moment, the unveiling of a recently discovered masterpiece by renowned artist Edward Hartman, expected to be the highest-selling item at the charity auction. Museum director Howard Bergman took to the small podium, tapping his glass for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed patrons of the West Field, it is my great pleasure to present Daybreak at Monterey, a long-lost Hartman that has not been seen in public for over 40 years. The crowd gathered around as two white-gloved assistants carefully removed the covering, revealing a breathtaking seascape bathed in golden morning light. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Victoria moved closer, her expression one of genuine appreciation. Absolutely magnificent, Miranda declared loudly. Howard, you've outdone yourself. The Rothschild Foundation will definitely be bidding on this treasure. Howard beamed. We're starting the bidding at $3 million, Miranda. A bargain for a Hartman of this caliber, Miranda replied with practiced nonchalance. Victoria had made her way to the front of the crowd, standing directly before the painting, studying its details with focused attention. Miranda's eyes narrowed. Excuse me, she called out, her voice sharp. Perhaps you could give others a chance to see, those of us who might actually be able to bid. She emphasized the last words with a pointed look at Victoria's simple attire. Several people snickered. Victoria stepped aside wordlessly, but her eyes never left the painting. I don't even know why she's still here, Jacqueline Stage whispered. It's like watching someone window shop for a Ferrari in their pajamas. Miranda's laugh was cutting. Some people have no sense of their place. It's embarrassing, really. Victoria finally turned, meeting Miranda's gaze directly for the first time. Something in her quiet dignity made Miranda falter momentarily. The brushwork in the lower right corner, Victoria said clearly, addressing Howard Bergman. It doesn't match Hartman's technique from that period. A hush fell over the nearby crowd. Howard blinked in surprise. I beg your pardon? Look closely, Victoria continued, pointing without touching. Hartman never used that cross-hatching method until his later works. This section appears different from the rest. Howard leaned in, studying the area she indicated, his brow furrowed. Miranda stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. How dare you question the authentication? Who exactly do you think you are? Victoria opened her mouth to respond when the gallery doors swung open and a distinguished man in his 60s entered. His silver hair and impeccable suit gave him an air of authority that immediately drew all eyes. That's James Harrington, Jacqueline whispered, the biggest art collector on the East Coast. And right on time, Miranda said, smoothing her skirt and preparing to intercept him. But James Harrington had already spotted something, or someone, across the room. His face broke into a broad smile as he called out, Victoria Hayes, the woman herself. The room went silent as James Harrington strode purposefully across the gallery floor, arms outstretched toward Victoria. His voice, accustomed to boardrooms and lecture halls, carried effortlessly. When they told me Victoria Hayes might attend tonight, I almost didn't believe it. You're notoriously difficult to catch at these events. Victoria's reserved smile warmed considerably as she accepted his embrace. Hello, James. It's been too long. Miranda stood frozen, champagne glass halfway to her lips, watching the interaction with growing confusion. James Harrington, whose collection was valued at over $300 million, whose opinion could make or break an artist's career, was embracing the woman she'd been ridiculing all evening. Ladies and gentlemen, James announced, keeping a friendly arm around Victoria's shoulders. For those who don't know, you're in the presence of greatness tonight. Victoria Hayes rarely graces these events with her presence. Howard Bergman hurried forward, confusion etched on his face. Mr. Harrington, you know Ms. Hayes? Know her? James laughed heartily. My God, man, everyone in the art world knows Victoria Hayes. Or they should. He turned to Victoria with admiration. Your foundation's work preserving indigenous art forms alone would be legacy enough. But your eye for emerging talent is simply unmatched. Jeffrey Williams stepped forward, comprehension dawning on his face. You're that Victoria Hayes of Hayes Ventures? Victoria nodded, her expression remaining modest. The same? Good heavens, Jeffrey breathed. Your acquisition of the Thompson collection last year was masterful, and your donation to the Metropolitan's restoration department. Miranda's face had drained of color. Hayes Ventures? She whispered to Jacqueline, who looked equally stunned. James turned his attention to the Hartman painting. Now, Victoria, I heard you mentioning something about the brushwork. You always did have the most discerning eye in the business. Victoria approached the painting again, this time with James and Howard flanking her. The technique in this section, she indicated, doesn't align with Hartman's documented approach from this period. I believe it may have been restored, perhaps not entirely faithfully to the original. Howard examined the area more carefully, then nodded slowly. You know, I think you're right. Our authentication team mentioned some restoration, but didn't flag it as significant. It doesn't diminish the piece's value, Victoria added kindly, but it should be noted in the provenance. James shook his head in admiration. This is why your collection is unparalleled, Victoria. You see what others miss. Around them, the crowd had begun to whisper urgently. Victoria Hayes of Hayes Ventures. Worth billions. Owns one of the largest private art collections in America. Turned down a seat on the Museum of Modern Art board. Donates millions anonymously. Miranda Rothschild stood perfectly still, her face a mask of horrified realization. Victoria, James said, guiding her toward the stunned museum director. Howard has been trying to secure a meeting with you for months. Your assistant is remarkably effective at keeping your calendar clear. Howard Bergman extended his hand, practically vibrating with eagerness. Ms. Hayes, I had no idea you would be attending tonight. We would have prepared a proper welcome. That's precisely why I come unannounced, Howard, Victoria replied with gentle humor. I prefer to observe without ceremony. Miranda Rothschild pushed forward, her social instincts overriding her shock. Her face had transformed into a mask of delight, as though the previous hours had never happened. Victoria Hayes. What a remarkable surprise. She air-kissed near Victoria's cheeks. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Miranda Rothschild, chairwoman of... We met earlier, Victoria stated simply. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Miranda's smile faltered only momentarily. Did we? I meet so many people at these events. You must forgive me. James Harrington raised an eyebrow. Victoria rarely forgets a face, Miranda. One of her many talents. Around them, the other socialites who had participated in the mockery began to shift uncomfortably. Jacqueline Kensington had turned an alarming shade of red, suddenly intensely interested in her champagne glass. Ms. Hayes, Howard interjected, would you honor us with your thoughts on the new acquisitions? Your insight would be invaluable. Victoria nodded graciously, and as she moved with Howard and James toward another section of the gallery, the whispers exploded behind them. Did you see Miranda's face? Hayes Ventures is worth what? 20 billion? She could buy this entire museum without blinking. And Miranda called her the maid. Jeffrey Williams fell into step beside them, his expression both chagrined and amused. I should have recognized you immediately, Ms. Hayes. Your donation to our educational program last year was transformative. Victoria smiled. The program's success is due to your implementation, Mr. Williams. I merely provided resources. As they toured the collection, more guests gravitated toward their group, eager to be associated with Victoria Hayes now that her identity was known. The transformation was as immediate as it was transparent. Miranda remained rooted to her spot, her social circle disintegrating as members peeled away to orbit Victoria instead. Jacqueline approached her, voice hushed. Miranda, she's the Hayes behind Hayes Tower on Fifth Avenue, and the Medical Research Center at Columbia, and I know who she is, Miranda hissed, her composure cracking. Why was she dressed like that? Why didn't anyone warn me? They say she's worth over $12 billion, Jacqueline continued, watching Victoria across the room. And we spent the evening calling her? Miranda cut her off with a sharp gesture. We need to fix this, now. The crowd around Victoria had grown, with socialites who had previously ignored or mocked her, now vying for her attention. Victoria maintained her quiet dignity, giving thoughtful responses to questions about art, but deflecting personal inquiries with practiced ease. Miranda circled the periphery of the group, waiting for an opening. When Victoria stepped away briefly to examine a small sculpture, Miranda pounced. Victoria, darling, she gushed, positioning herself directly in Victoria's path. I simply must apologize for our little misunderstanding earlier. Had I known who you were, it would have changed your behavior? Victoria finished, her voice gentle but pointed. Miranda blinked rapidly. Well, of course, we would have welcomed you properly. Which highlights the issue, doesn't it? Victoria met Miranda's gaze steadily. Our treatment of others shouldn't depend on their bank accounts or social standing. James Harrington, overhearing, nodded approvingly. Victoria's famous for it, you know, shows up places without fanfare, observes how people behave naturally. He lowered his voice conspiratorially, though still loud enough for nearby guests to hear. She's known to make significant donations to institutions where staff and patrons show kindness to everyone, not just VIPs. Miranda's face paled further. I assure you, that's exactly the philosophy of the Rothschild Foundation. We value all members of the community. Your actions speak volumes, Miranda, Victoria said quietly. As do mine. Miranda opened her mouth to respond, but Howard Bergman approached, practically glowing with excitement. Ms. Hayes, we're about to begin the auction portion of our evening. Would you do us the honor of saying a few words? Your passion for arts education aligns perfectly with tonight's cause. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. Briefly, if you think it would help. As she followed Howard to the podium, Miranda remained behind, her carefully constructed social throne crumbling beneath her. Socialites who had laughed at her jokes earlier now avoided eye contact. At the podium, Victoria spoke without notes, her voice clear and unpretentious. Art has the power to transform lives, not through its monetary value, but through its ability to foster empathy and understanding. When we support arts education, we're investing in a future where people see beyond surfaces to appreciate the depth and complexity beneath. Her words carried a subtle rebuke that wasn't lost on the audience. Several guests glanced uncomfortably at Miranda, who maintained a rigid smile, even as her knuckles whitened around her clutch purse. The auction began, with Victoria's presence electrifying the room. Bids climbed higher than expected as donors competed for recognition. When the contested Hartman painting came up, the bidding quickly soared past $5 million. Miranda bid aggressively, desperate to salvage her reputation. $6 million, she called out, her voice strained but triumphant. The auctioneer acknowledged her bid, scanning the room. $6 million from Mrs. Rothschild. Do we have 6.5? Victoria raised her paddle slightly. $10 million. The room gasped collectively. $10 million from Ms. Hayes, the auctioneer stammered. Going once. Miranda's face crumpled in defeat. The auction concluded with Victoria's unprecedented $10 million purchase of the Hartman painting, instantly setting a new record for the Westfield's annual fundraiser. Applause filled the gallery as Victoria signed the necessary paperwork. What will you do with the painting? A reporter asked, having rushed over from the press section. Victoria smiled. Donate it back to the museum's permanent collection with one condition, that it be displayed in the educational wing where students can study it. more applause erupted. Howard Bergman looked close to tears of joy. James Harrington chuckled beside her. Always teaching lessons, Victoria, in more ways than one. As the evening wound down, Victoria prepared to leave. The crowd parted respectfully, faces that had earlier shown disdain now beaming with admiration. Jeffrey Williams approached to say goodbye. Ms. Hayes, thank you for your generosity tonight, and I must apologize for not recognizing you earlier. Victoria shook her head. No apology needed, Mr. Williams. You treated me with respect before you knew my name or net worth. That speaks to your character. She glanced meaningfully across the room, where Miranda stood isolated, her social circle having disintegrated. True character reveals itself in how we treat those we believe can do nothing for us. Near the exit, Miranda made one last desperate attempt at reconciliation, stepping into Victoria's path. Victoria, I do hope you'll accept my invitation to the Rothschild Foundation luncheon next month. We'd be honored to have someone of your perspective join us. Victoria regarded her thoughtfully. Thank you, Miranda, but I'm quite selective about where I spend my time these days. She paused, then added kindly, perhaps consider that the new maid you meet tomorrow might be worth knowing for who she is, not what she owns. Miranda flinched at her own words being reflected back to her. Victoria continued toward the door, where her driver waited. James walked her out, chatting amiably. Behind them, the social hierarchy of the room had been permanently altered. Whispers followed in Victoria's wake. They say she wears simple clothes everywhere. Donated half her fortune to education programs. Never puts her name on buildings despite funding them. Victoria Hayes had entered the Westfield Gallery as an invisible woman and left as its most memorable presence, not because of her wealth, but because of the quiet dignity with which she carried it. In her wake, she left a powerful reminder that true worth can't be measured by designer labels or social connections, but by how we treat others when we think no one important is watching. If this story touched your heart, remember that appearances never tell the whole story. The cashier you meet, the janitor you pass, the quiet person in simple clothes, any of them might be extraordinary in ways you'd never imagine. Have you ever judged someone too quickly only to be surprised by who they really were? Share your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us to look beyond the surface and let us know where you're watching from. Until next time, remember, kindness costs nothing, but its value is immeasurable.